Hello and welcome to Season of War. Oh, I'm losing my voice, or I lost my voice already. But hello, everyone. Whether you're joining us live or watching this back in the future, first off, I want to thank you for your time and I hope you'll enjoy this little video we have for you tonight. If you haven't heard, we've just finished up the first ever Season of War GT. Just finished up yesterday. Today's Monday. I'm not at all frazzled from the entire crazy weekend. But with all that said, excited tonight to be talking with Zach, doing our first player recap from the weekend. The GT, obviously, being our kind of in our backyard and our own event. We had most of the team there, all of the team there, I think.
Yeah, the whole team, and then you were the great host of the event.
Yeah, I was doing all the hard work and also being the ringer.
Yeah, the most challenging ringer of any tournament ever.
Auto wins though. That's all right. Hey Justin. Hey George. What's up, guys? George, I want to say I really enjoyed your recap video that you put up. I watched that earlier today, so great job. Glad you enjoyed the tournament. But yeah, I guess first off, just to give a quick overview, as we always do, talking about the GT. 65 players, so good number. Big diversity in lists overall, except for like two significant asterisks. One being 10 Nighthawk players out of 65 overall. Second being like 27 Purple Suns out of 65 players, so like over 40%. So those were two noticeable, like, significant, I guess, meta shifts unique to RGT or this weekend. So that was made things interesting. Otherwise, kind of normal Swiss pairings, random first round, and then scoring or tiebreakers was wins first, and then battle points second, strength of schedule third. So as a caveat, the reason we did that, because that actually wasn't what we had originally planned. It was going to be battle tactics and then grand strategies based off the previous GHB. But as we kind of talked about and learned from Summer Slaughter, didn't think that was the most balanced with how tough the tactics are this year or this season. So we kind of went back to the VP because there was also a lot less bonus VP out there this book. But Zach, getting into the event, we'll jump into your list in a second, but any thoughts on the event as I guess you were preparing and planning for it?
Yeah, it was tough because even before lists were finalized or lists were submitted, I knew that there was going to be a lot of Night Haunt. And unfortunately for me, Night Haunt is pretty solid against my list. Gets rid of my rend, gets rid of my damage because it can reduce it by 1 minimum if they include a Cruciator. So basically was going in there hoping to have minimal Night Haunt pairings, or if I do, hopefully just one and then maybe later on. So but knew that going in, but was pretty confident besides that. Purple Suns are spooky, but there are ways to kind of try to play around them as best you can and screen them out. And as long as you're not against a casting Dom army, you're relatively okay. So yeah, I was happy to go in with just my list I've been running for about 6-7 months now, and I was excited to go to my first like big GT. So
Oh,
it
yeah,
was definitely a ton
you
of
weren't
fun.
at Red Harvest last year.
No, I
You
have
pulled a
like a
ridge.
family. Yeah, I pulled a ridge and had a event that is a reoccurring annual event, so I won't be able to make this Red Harvest either, which is too bad.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Um, but as you said, you're playing your classic world famous Beastclaw Raiders list. But so do you want to take us through that first? Obviously, you've talked about it before, but just for in case you haven't
Yeah,
seen previous videos.
yeah, of course. So, starting off, I have Kragnos. So Kragnos is great in this list. He's not only something that is really tanky, but he's also something that benefits the list and synergizes due to the 3d6 charge for friendly destruction units wholly within 12. So that pairs very well with the two other heroes on my list, which are two Frost Lords on Stonehorn, because you do mortals on the charge equal to the charge value of the roll. and so each 4-up will be a mortal wound. So it's adds a lot of mortals, and not just that, it adds a lot of range and threat ranges. So it really makes the list what it is. Without it, it would not be as good as I would want it to be. So that works out great. But below him, we have the Icebrow Hunter, who's my general. He unlocks the Frost Sabers as battle line, and there's 6 of them as my min battle line. And then I give him the command trait for the additional move. 1 inch, which is for the sub-allegiance of Boulderhead, is a requirement. So can give my Frost Lords an additional inch to move, but it's also a great tech piece to bring down and maybe in a shooting matchup with some wolves, and eat some Unleash Hell, or even just again to backlines and get some easy tactics or Kappa open objective. And then I have a Fire Belly with Billowing Ash, so that's a -1 to hit spell. Super useful. Cast on an 8, so kind of tough to cast, but it can really make some tanky units like Kragnos and the Stonehorns even more tanky. Then I have a Frostlord on Stonehorn with Arcane Tome, just obviously a great artifact, a pretty much staple second or first
Yep.
artifact in a lot of lists. And then with Flaming Weapon, because extra damage is always nice, but I tend to cast Mystic Shield more on that just because tankiness is important. If one of my pieces go down, then I'm in trouble. Then he has Old Grantooth as his mount trait for additional charge, and then my other Frost Lord on Stonehorn has Bram the Sfard, which is +1 hit for the mount, and then Metal Cruncher, which is the best mount trait maybe in the
Oh
game, which is
yeah.
D6 mortal wounds at the start of the combat phase if you're a 2, 3, or 4-up save, which is just huge. As
The
definitely
stuff it
like
really matters against.
yeah, exactly. It's won me games in the past. It's opened up huge opportunities. It's just incredibly valuable. And then, like I said, 3 units of 2 Frost Sabers as my main battle line. The best and cheapest screens that you could ask for. Great little runners that can just get in the way and eat Unleash Hells. And then that's all wrapped up in a command entourage for the smaller heroes. And then the Battle Regiment to get me as low drops as possible at 5.
Nice. So yeah, like you said, pretty classic. Not classic, but you've been running this list for a while, so you're also very practiced and experienced with it. Always something that you want to be going into a GT, right? The more reps you have, the better.
Yeah, yeah.
But
It's like I mentioned, it's one I've been playing for months and months and months now, and probably won't stop playing unless something incredibly drastic happens or
yeah,
until the new book comes out. So
you're not too worried about the Delation veteran, or you're not playing into it too much. The GV meta was 6 wolves.
yeah, it didn't. The whole change in the GHB didn't change my list at all. The loss of Hunters of the Heartlands was amazing for my guys because now I can
Oh,
at least know I can try Roar or Stomp or anything like that whenever I want. And yeah, the GV side doesn't impact me too much. Proving grounds can be an issue, but so far, basically across all my games, it hasn't been an
I
issue.
was going to ask you that
Um,
actually. That was a, so yeah, it's
yeah,
interesting to hear.
yeah. If I can go second, I'm usually the one picking it. And you might have heard some maybe other talking heads or other players discuss this as well. But choosing ones preemptively, so not ones that you're going to capture immediately, but ones that you say, okay, maybe a turn from now or 2 turns from now,
And it'd
I'm
be
going to want to capture that and chuck
yeah,
a monster on it. So I'm going to make it a proving ground now. So when I take the first turn in the next round and I don't get the choice, I know it cannot be chosen for a proving ground.
yeah,
So it can be pretty helpful to plan ahead in that case.
for sure. Cool. Well, why don't we jump into round one? Take us through. You were excited for this matchup, I'm sure.
Yes. So going in, I kind of heard me in my preamble. I basically said, you know what? There's about a dice roll's chance that I get paired into Night Haunt, but like a 1 in 6. So I was just like, I'm hoping that I don't. And then if I do, I hope it's not one with a purple sun or with a Cruciator, because there was a few that didn't have a purple
Yeah.
sun or Cruciator. So I was hoping for one of those that didn't have it. Unfortunately, my opponent, who's actually a local player at Torchlight, our local, or at least my local
Mhm.
game store. Um,
Shout
so,
out to Andrew in the chat from
yep,
Torchlight.
Andrew in the chat. Yes, Andrew M. Go check out Torchlight. They're a great store and awesome guys. So definitely support them if you can. Um, but yeah, so turn 1, I was less drops than him, as you can see in this list. He was a bunch of drops, and I'm only 5. So let him go first because I want to be charging as much as possible. We were in the presence of idols. So it's the objectives, 1 in the center, and then 2 not in your territories, and then it's the corner deployments.
Yeah, opposite
So
diagonals.
yeah, exactly. So I deployed kind of far back, but not too far back. My average threat range is 24 inches with my Stonehorns and about 20 inches with Kragnos. So it'd be pretty tough for him to get into my lines, and then I made sure to screen out with Frost Sabers and also my Icebrow Hunter, because Night Hunt gets to pick up 3 units at the end of deployment, and then basically deep strike them in any of the next movement phases. So he sets up basically on the line, and then does a pretty simple first turn when your opponent's completely out of range. He hops on all of the objectives to take them. Some chain rafts went down to the right, just a small group of 10. And then basically his main force went into the middle. And then he left, actually the left one open. So that was an easy one to just chuck 2 wolves on in my turn. So, yep, so then I have the next turn, and I see that there's an opening actually on one of the sides of his screening, because when he went in, he basically went in a castle formation with a bunch of spirit hosts and some banshees and some blade guys, and they're covering the 3 heroes in the center. And I know with Night Haunt, especially with the Cruciator, I want that thing as quickly as possible, because that's what's reducing my damage by 1, and basically all my stuff is multi-damage. So I saw that opening there, and so the only thing that was guarding one of his heroes was just 4 banshees. And I picked that out, and I wanted to make sure I could get into that hero. So I move everything up. I move 1 Stonehorn up the left side, which has Arcane Tome. I move the other one with Metal Cruncher up the right side, and I move Kragnos basically dead up the center. Pretty easy charges across the board. It was like 4 or 5 or 3-inch charges on 3d6, so there's really no issues there. And get my Stonehorn, the main one I wanted to get into the Banshees, and then killed them on the charge roll. So when it came to the combat phase, I was able to pile in and get into the hero. And then I get into the hero, and then I remember that Spirit Host, which he had 9 of them, have the bodyguard rule for all of his heroes. And so I was just like, oh, shoot, that's right. So I still put everything into the hero and tried to do as much damage as possible. I don't think I killed it. I think I left it pretty low, like on 1 or 2 wounds, and then killed a few spirit hosts. And then my Stonehorn on the left side did some damage, not as much as I hoped. He kind of whiffed on a few rolls, and then with me not having
saves too.
Then the ethereal saves and the reduced damage, I didn't do too much damage there. And then Kragnos went to the spirit host and killed about 3, which was pretty good for like a lot of his stuff being high rend and high damage. So that was fine. And basically we were stuck in combat for the next few battle rounds. Nothing too exciting happening. We were like literally just all jam-packed in there.
Fighting over that middle objective mostly.
Just over that middle objective. I had some wolves on the far left side that were okay. He had some chain rasps that were on the far right side. And actually, so my tactic in the second battle round, I wanted to do eye for an eye, so kill a unit. The hero was, I believe, dead at this point because Graham won the priority roll for 2. And so I had to kill, I think it was 7 chain rasps with my Stonehorn, or finish off the spirit host with Kragnos, or finish off some blade geist with my other Stonehorn on the left side. And so Kragnos goes in, leaves the spirit host 1 alive. So I was just like, okay, cool. Like I still have a couple other chances. Go attack the blade geists. They like take 3 or 4 damage, not very much at all. I'm like, okay, so hopefully I'll be able to wipe the chain rasps. And then I think I left the chain rasps on 1 or 2 wounds remaining, just with all the -1 damage and ignoring my rend, which is so vital for me. So At the end, I was just like, okay, 1, 2, 3, and I get my tactic. And then Graham's like, no, you don't get your tactic. I'm like, what do you mean I don't get my tactic? He's like, you didn't kill anything. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't kill anything, because I thought it was so for sure that I
Yeah.
would, because there was just so little wounds for everything that I was going into. So that hurt. So I dropped that tactic. Um, and then I think it was at that point the fourth bow round, the third bow round, and Graham brought his a couple of his blade geist that he got down from the sky, and then also one of the blade geist units that I end up wiping over the course of the turn. He rolled a 4 up to bring them back as well, and so these blade geist, they're ready to go, they're ready to charge in Scarlet Doom, and so they charge into both of my Stonehorns, and the ones that were in combat with the other Stonehorn also retreated and charged in, and did a bunch of mortals on the charge, so that hurt. I do have mortal wound saves on my Stonehorns, but still did a good chunk of damage. And then Graham comes in, he does all of his attacks, and my one poor Stonehorn with Metal Cruncher died by about 3 wounds, but then I was lucky with my other one that lived on 1 wound. And then after that turn happened, I realized I had Billowing Ash off and forgot to include it. So all of his stuff was actually -1 to
Should
hit,
have been, yeah.
and I didn't realize that. And so my Stonehorn on the right might have lived, which would have been huge, but it ended up dying. So I was just like, oh, okay, shoot. So he went down, and I was just like, dang. But I was still in it. Like, I was still holding the objective. Kragnos counts as a bunch, so I was still holding it there. I still held the left at that point, so I was still pretty happy. And then basically just a few things happened in the fourth bow round, but nothing major. And then the fifth bow round came, and so I went first in the fourth, and then I rolled a 5 for my prio, and Graham rolled a 6, and he beat me on that one.
Always
And
painful.
always painful, and I needed that one, I think, to win the game. I didn't do the math fully, but I think I needed that one to win the game. And so there was very little left on the board. Basically, both my Stonehorns were dead. I had my Firebelly and I had Kragnos, and then I had 2 wolves. And so he moves closer to Kragnos, and I get a 5-inch redeploy, and he wasn't even able to move within 3, so it was about a 10-inch charge. So I was like, perfect. Like, this will be tough. It's like, if Kragnos can live here, I can still potentially get my Grand Strat, and then also get my tactic. And then on his first die roll, he makes a 10-inch charge, gets into Kragnos, kills Kragnos.
Yeah, I was standing there right at that moment watching it when you rolled that 10 charge.
Yeah. So I usually don't swear too much. I usually say "oh shoot" or "gosh darn" or something like that. But that time I did swear because it was just it hurt so much, because it's like, okay, great, like 10-inch charge, like super unlikely, and then didn't even need to re-roll it, just
Yeah.
10. Actually, I think it was an 11. And then I was just like, oh man, okay. So that basically ended my game against Graham. It was a lot tighter than I thought it would be, just because I was able to get into the hero and kill the hero that could cast Purple Sun. So that was huge, or at least auto cast Purple Sun.
Yeah.
So I got rid of the Purple Sun threat through the whole game, so that was definitely worth it. But I did either need that prio, or I did need that 10-inch charge to not go. I think not winning that prio might have lost me the game, but at least I would have been able to secure a few more points. But yeah, that 10-inch charge definitely put the nail in the coffin. So Graham ended up taking it. I believe it was either 26 or 22 to my 17. So that was my first game. It was a tough round 1. It was the matchup I was hoping the least for, but I tried to hold I tried to hold in there as long as I could. But yeah, it was a really fun game. Graham's a good guy, super nice guy. We've got a few games in before, but the times I played him, he was playing Seraphon, which luckily I'm familiar with because of Ridge. So I knew a lot about those matchups casually. But yeah, so Night Haunt, definitely a tough competitor for my first round 1.
For sure. And I can't confirm the score. It was 25-17.
25 to 17. Okay, perfect. Yeah. So Graham kind of took it handily there. And then so that led into my round 2 going 0-1. And I was against Mark Fournier, or Shorty Painting Studios, if you ever see him in the chat or on any socials. He's usually pretty active on a lot of the Warhammer channels, and he also has his own Twitch.
Yeah, painting stream.
And yep, painting stream. So go check him out if you can. An amazing painter, an amazing hobbyist, and a really fun opponent. So he was running a Magmadroth heavy list. So he was in Lofnir. He had the Rune Father on Magmadroth, and then 2 Rune Sons on Magmadroth. The main issue I was worried with here is they have a Mortal Wound Reflect whenever you do damage to him in melee, and all of my damage is basically melee damage except for my mortals on the charge. So that would be my only saving grace in this point. So I needed to try to roll well for my charge rolls, at least going into them. Then he had a Battlesmith, a Rune Smiter, and a Rune Master. So Battlesmith solid, obviously bring back Hearthguard Berserkers on a 4-up, which is huge. And then 2 priests that can cast invocations or just great buffing prayers. And then his grand strat actually is amazing. The Fire Slayer is 1. So basically, as long as your opponent doesn't have a priest, you're pretty solid in getting your grand strat, because all you need to do is just cast an invocation, make sure it doesn't disappear itself by the 5th round, and you got your grand strat. So pretty good idea on Mark's end to pick that one up. Yeah, it's tough. It's just like, nope, I don't have a priest, so you get your grand strat. So I knew that like he would be 3 points up base just because of that. So I had to play with that in mind. Once again, in this case, Mark was a lot more drops than me. I believe he was around 10 to 12, and I was still 5. So in this, we were in the old Forcing the Hand, which, remind me what this one's called again, Jordan? This one is...
Oh, it's weird died. What is it? 6 objectives.
It's a 6 objectives one where you pick your own alpha. And so it has like that weird up and down deployment. So Mark deployed very conservatively. He didn't necessarily backboard, but he was pretty close to backboarding in his back corner.
Close to the chest. Thanks, James, in the chat.
That's what it is. Perfect. Thank you. So he deployed pretty far back, and he was relatively far away from a lot of objectives, but I think he just wanted to make sure he's out of ranges for all of my super long threat ranges. Yep, there you go. So this was after his first turn here. So you can see that this is him moving up. So he was only on that top objectives there. And I think he was only on the top 2 there, and then he wasn't on the bottom one. So, and I also marked that one as a proving ground, because he could run a Magmadroth to potentially get on there. So there you go. Once again, using it in my favor this time to make sure that one of his monsters can't go and grab it.
The dwarf's short legs aren't too twitch, so.
Yeah, even with the +2, they're a little too far back to touch on the objective. So as you guys can see, I kind of deployed as close as I could while still staying relatively safe. And so then it went into my turn, and I had some wolves in that top right corner, and I just put them on that objective there. And then I already held my home 2 that I was on. So it's basically just rushing that bottom left objective. And so I sent my Stonehorn at the bottom there. He had a Magmadroth just to the left of that bottom objective, so I sent one there. I sent my other Stonehorn into the Hearthguard Berserkers, and I sent Kragnos into the Magmadroth that was on the bottom left. And so Stonehorn goes in, does about 4 mortal wounds on the charge. Kragnos goes into a monster, so I'm like, okay, here we go. Like, big Kragnos charge. As long as I don't roll a 7, I'll be doing some damage. I roll double 1s.
Oh.
And I was just like, okay. So 1 times 1 equals 1. So I do 1 mortal wound to him on the charge.
Better than none.
It is better than none. And then my other Stonehorn just goes into those Hearthguard Berserkers, and I think I did 3 or 4 mortal wounds after their 4-up. So I was pretty happy with that, because they're obviously extremely tanky against mortal wounds, and yeah, so then we went into combat phase, and Metal Cruncher, it's time for it to kick in. At least I'll get some mortal wounds going into that Magma Droth again. I roll another one. And so I was just like, ah, shoot, okay. Because I want to do as much mortals as possible for less blood reflect damage back, right? So I was just like, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to activate with that Stonehorn then into that Magma Droth that was in the bottom left, and try to do as much damage there, because at least he has a 5-up ward for any of the damage he reflects, and I think he had about 13 wounds left at that point. My Magmadroth, or sorry, my Stonehorn absolutely whiffs. I get only one of my spear attacks through, and then Mark says, it would be pretty funny if I rolled 3 6s here, and then he rolled 3 6s, and I didn't do a single damage to the Magmadroth with my Stonehorn in combat. And I was just like, oh man, that sucks.
Those when it rains, it pours.
Exactly. Doing just it was too bad. And then so I was just like, okay, then it was Mark's turn to go. So he goes in with the Hearthguard Berserkers. He piles a few into Kragnos, and I believe he does 6 mortal wounds with the pile-in, and then another damage sneaks through. And then I activate with Kragnos, and I forget how Kragnos took some other damage elsewhere. I forget where, but so he was down to 7 wounds, and so Kragnos, I fight him back into the Magmadroth that my Stonehorn did no damage into. Absolutely destroy the Magmadroth, and then Mark rolls absolute crap ton of mortal wounds hitting back. And oh, sorry, so that's what happened. My bad. So the mortal wounds actually came first, and he did 10 mortal wounds back to Kragnos.
Oof.
And I think I saved either none or one of them, so I almost saved nothing. And so Kragnos just took a full face of mortal wounds, 10 mortal wounds off of 13 dice on 4-up, so that hurt pretty bad. And then Mark piled in, with the Hearthguard Berserkers, and I had 7 wounds remaining on Kragnos. He did 7 damage. I needed to roll a 6 for my ward, just 1 6. Didn't roll any. Kragnos goes down. But at this point, the Hearthguard Berserker block was pretty weak. The Magmadroth was dead. And then he just had 1 Rune Son left and 1 Rune Father left. And I was able to get into both of them. And so I killed the Rune Son, and then I was able to move off and then go kill the Rune Father in the subsequent turn, because the Rune Father was too far away to get a charge in, so only the Rune Son got in, and then he died, and then I went into the Rune Father and then wiped him on my turn. And then at that point, the Hearthguard block was dead, all his Magmadroths are dead, and then he basically just had a few heroes, so was able to just kind of go in and wipe up the remaining force. I think it was round 4. We decided to just call it and talk it out, because there wasn't too much to do. He was basically seeing what tactics he could do, and then so we called it. So it was a super fun game. Definitely went a lot better than my first round, so that was a nice motivation boost there. So at least I wasn't 0-2 to start off with. So yeah, it was super fun. It's a cool list. As you guys know, if you've watched the channel, I also have Fire Slayers. I don't have a Magmadroth list, but I think the Magmadroth list is the way to go.
Yeah, it is super cool. I was literally thinking today how fun it would be to like get one, or I think it would be a cool build.
Yeah, and they're a cool build, and they're, like I said, they're strong against melee, right? So if you go into them and you hit them, it's like you can just get a bunch of mortal wounds reflected back at you. There's lots of cool stuff that you can do with them. They're fast, which is unlike the rest of the army. They got +2 wounds and Lofnir, so they got a lot going for them.
Yeah, good solid tech.
Yeah. So it was a fun game. And like I said, Mark's a great guy, so it was just an awesome round 2 game.
Always a pleasure playing Mark.
Yes.
As I'm sure, both the two of you are often competing for best sports awards at tournaments, so I'm sure that was the kindest game between the two of you, or the most gentlemanly?
Yeah, it was definitely a good one. Yeah, so then ended up 1-1 going into my next game, and I believe it was this one where I could have matched into Carl, and I really didn't want to match into Carl. A, because he's a teammate, and it always sucks when you have to play a teammate.
Yep.
But B, he has an Incarnate and Purple Sun, which are both horribly terrible things against my list.
Yeah.
So I was hoping not to run into any of those.
Yeah, you have
Um,
a strong army, but you don't like a lot of the very common things right now in the meta.
yeah, exactly. I don't like the Purple Sun, I don't like Nighthaunt, and I don't like Incarnates, which
Yep.
are unfortunately two of those things can be brought in every army, and one of those armies is very popular right
Yeah.
now. So just have to power through at least for now, and then hope for the best when those sorts of matchups roll around.
Yeah.
Luckily for me, Carl and I didn't get matched up, and I went to Iron Jaws, and I actually played against another local player from Torchlight named Anthony. I played a few games against his Iron Jaws as well.
Oh, nice.
Um,
So a familiar opponent.
Familiar opponent again, yes. Actually, all my opponents are ones I've played previously, which is fun. Um,
That's
yeah,
funny
so
though.
it was,
How,
yeah,
like so how it weirdly so often goes at GTs. You like show up
yeah,
with a group of friends and you just play each other.
yeah, yeah. So it was funny, and so his list, it was a pretty interesting list. So it wasn't Pig's list. It was so he had a Maw Crusher with Master of Magic, Great Green Handed Gork, and Fasten, and obviously Arcane Tome to pile onto that. Two War Chantas, 2 units of 3 Gruntas, 2 units of 5 Ardboys, 1 unit of 10 Brutes, and then he had a Rogue Idol chucked in there. Don't see too many Rogue Idols in a lot of
Iron
Iron Jaws
Jaws, yeah.
lists, at least from what I've seen. And it's actually like a pretty strong beat stick. And so Iron Jaws is a super fun matchup against my list. We're both incredibly fast. We both hit incredibly hard. So it's basically who can take the punch the best and then live and then dish it back out again.
And two
So
fast
yeah,
armies, so
just it's either one of us, unless we both backboard, could be in our faces turn one. And even if I backboarded, he could always just teleport himself, and then my destroyer is right in front of my lines. So, um, he outdropped me. He had a battle reg, so I believe he was either 3 or 4 drops. So he just beat me, and I basically knew that I was going to be going first just based off of deployment. It would be pretty risky for him to take first. So I just screened out a little bit. This was on Nidus Pass, so I screened out my backline just in case he wanted to be sneaky and sneak back there. I realized I should have been sneaky and tried to sneak Kragnos back there. Actually, I don't even know if his 5-inch base can fit with
yeah.
like all the corners and stuff. So I need to maybe try that out because I'd be 9 inches away, but it's a 3d6 charge,
Yeah, that'd be
which
awesome.
is yeah, it's pretty makeable. And then I'm in a back line with Kragnos, which is not something you want to have in your back line. But didn't think about it at the time. I was mainly just thinking about screening out and then getting hit from the front. So as you can see, I deployed my wolves just in case he decided to go first, just to screen him out as best as I can. But I got first, so I just moved my wolves in the center, in such a way that if he tried to use fast stun in my destroyers or vice versa, he would be stuck behind, like he wouldn't be able to do the full move.
Mhm.
So he'd be stuck behind and not really be able to go too much of anywhere. And then I chuck those 2 wolves that you see in the bottom right on that objective, and then I use those other 2 wolves right there. I basically kept them where they are, shoved them up a little bit to screen, because even at that point I held 1 and held 2 and held more for my turn, because he wasn't on that top left objective yet, since it was the first turn of the battle round. And I knew that no matter what, he'd be able to outcap me on that, even if I put both my wolves on there. He had a unit of 5 Ardboys and also a unit of pigs that could either A, charge or just outcap me by putting 3 of them on. So
Yeah.
I decided to keep them alive and keep them as a screen because they're both important for screening and for my final grand strat if they're able to hang around, which is won't back down. So I mean, more guys in their territory, wholly within their territory. So those wolves are pretty great at that if they're not just getting obliterated as screens. So then it's Anthony's turn, and he basically does what I would have expected him to do. So my wolves that were on that bottom right objective, he goes with the Gorgruntas and kills them. He actually did a pretty smart play of teleporting the Ard boys that are in the bottom right, or I guess like top middle right. And so he teleported those to be 9 inches away from my Frost Sabers that were trying to screen out the Maw Crusher.
Mm.
And then he just moved his other guys like I expected onto that top left objective and took it. So then with my destroyers, he got a charge into my middle Frost Sabers with the Yard Boys, wiped those guys, and then like I mentioned before, the 2 Frost Sabers in the bottom right were also wiped by the Gorgruntas. And then he screened himself out pretty well. The Ard boys were in front of the Rogue Idol and Maw Crusher that moved up just a smidge. The Brutes were just behind that big terrain piece right there, so they were in a safe spot. And then his Ard boys were kind of screening his Gorgruntas in the top left. So he had a pretty commanding position, and I was actually pretty spooked at this point because even if I got the turn, I unless I got like a lucky charge roll and got super far in, I wouldn't really be doing too much damage to anything that
That
could.
you really want to get into.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Brutes would still be safe, the Rogue Idol would still be safe, and the Maw Crusher would still be safe. And those are the 3 biggest threats. So he played it really well and screened out. But then he kind of said Destruction Brain go burr. And when he won the priority roll for 2, he decided to take it. So it was something that we also discussed after the game, but he charged everything in. So he threw various teleports and movement shenanigans
Yeah.
and my destroyers. Basically, that unit of Gorgruntas that you see on the right there, they were able to go into my bottom Stonehorn. His Rogue Idol was able to go into both Stonehorns. The Maw Crusher was able to go into Kragnos, and the Brutes were able to go a little bit into Kragnos and that Stonehorn in the middle. So a lot of hard-hitting stuff going into my units. To be preemptive, I did have Billowing Ash up because I knew that'd be important, and another reason why I would be okay if I wasn't able to get the Prio. And then I also Finest Hour that Stonehorn in the middle just because I knew he was the most susceptible to die because Kragnos can be pretty tanky, himself
Yeah.
just because he has an innate 2-up.
Yeah. And
Um,
20 wounds isn't too bad.
yeah, not too shabby. So he activates with the Brutes, which are now only down to 8 through Stomp and Metal Cruncher. So 2 mortal wounds from Stomp, and then I rolled a nice 5 for Metal Cruncher. So that was able to wipe out 2 Brutes, which is huge because each one of them is 2 damage apiece
Oh, yeah.
with 3 attacks. He popped Wasp, so they're -3. They're +1 to hit because I'm a biggin. So like they can really tear apart big monsters. That's what they're designed to do. But luckily, I was actually able to roar his Maw Crusher with Kragnos,
Ooh.
so there was no all-out defense going to a bunch of units, so that helped out a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah, that's actually huge.
Yeah, it was massive, and he actually, with his Rogue Idol, failed the roar into my Stonehorn in the middle. So I was able to all-out defense when he activated the Brutes into the middle one. So he got like an average amount of attacks through. I made about an average to a little bit more average saves, and then I made a good like half of my ward saves on the 5-up.
Nice.
So that Stonehorn stuck around with 5 wounds, which was huge because no smashing and bashing. Which
Yes.
was his
True.
plan to do smashing and bashing with the Brutes, kill my Stonehorn, Maw Crusher goes into Kragnos, probably doesn't kill Kragnos, but definitely does a crap ton of damage to him, like would
Brackets his
almost kill him.
attacks.
Yeah, exactly. So I got really lucky there, so then I said, I'm going to activate with Kragnos. And so I all attacked Kragnos, and I blew up his Maw Crusher.
Oh.
And so it was pretty spooky. And actually, Carl, since we were so close in pairings, he was beside me, and he looked over before that happened, and he told me later in the game, he's like, "Yeah, I looked really bad for you. I thought you lost." And so, a little bit of a spoiler alert there, but since the Maw Crusher died, I then went in with my Stonehorn into the brutes, and they all died or ran through battle shock. And then my Stonehorn at the bottom went the Gorgrentas and killed 2 of them, and there's only 1 left on 3 wounds, and the Rogue Idol was still full. And at that point, Anthony saw what happened with 2 of his main hammers dead, the centerpiece of his army, the Maw Crusher, dead, and basically all 3 of my key pieces alive, and then going into my turn.
Yeah, I was just saying at the top of the round on his turn. That's
Yeah.
rough.
Yeah, so it was still my go, and so he put his hand across the table and shook my hand, and he said, "I think that's it for me." And I said, "Fair enough." So we just talked out the rest of the game, and then he discussed what if he went second there instead of going first, and I said, "Yeah, that wouldn't be that bad of an idea, just because you had the screens up." And so I just did a bit of rolling because it was a pretty quick game, so just to see what would happen. But yeah, so it was a pretty speedy third game for sure, but it's always like that with destruction. It's basically who can survive and then who can get hit,
Yeah.
or who can hit hardest and not have to need to get hit back.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So that turn 2 priority is always or often pivotal, but I guess depending on how aggressive you are or aren't. But
yeah, exactly.
they're just and like you said, the 5-up ward save, it's like that it can just like really pop off sometimes, and like you said, keep a Stonehorn alive when he there's a good chance of him going down.
Yeah, yeah, it's great. Like a 5-up board is huge. I'm sure anyone who rolls anything that's around like a 5 or a 6, like it's so much better than not having anything. And it's so much better than just having a 6. Like the amount of times with Kragnos where I've rolled like, okay, like here's 4 dice and I roll like 4 5s and I needed like 6s for his ward. So yeah, fives are huge. Yeah, and just adds to their tankiness. Making like all of them being heroes with finest hour, able to get them to -1 to hit, and so it's yeah, so that went pretty well. So at the end of day 1, I was 2-1 and feeling pretty good. And then I learned I was actually going to be facing a mirror match as my round 4. And so
A
this is
villain.
Andrew. Yep, yep. So Andrew, who's in the chat, literally the identical list as mine, down to the T. No differences whatsoever. And so I knew that coming into the second day, and so this one was won't back down. So that's the one where you get to it's the 6 objectives split down lengthwise, or I guess it's split down widthwise. You play lengthwise, and so that's a bring GV back on a 4-up, which was basically irrelevant to both me and Andrew, with
Yeah.
our only GV being Frost Sabers and the rest of our units being heroes.
And especially being
Um,
units of 2. Like one
yeah,
only if
exactly,
one Frost Saver dies would it be relevant.
exactly. Yeah, so I won the first big roll, which was the deployment roll. And so I deployed first and then gave Andrew first. And Andrew played very well. He moved his Frost Sabers up just a smidge, just to hold more objectives than me. And then it was my turn. And then I basically did the same thing, moved some Frost Sabers up, moved my general up, and then I got hold 1, hold 2 still, I believe. I don't think I got hold more at that point. And I kept all my other guys still basically backboarded where they were, like outside of range, just to be safe. And then it was the turn 2 roll, or a roll for round 2, and then I win prio. And I was just like, shoot, I just should have been dumb and aggressive and one up. And then if I did, I would have been golden and I would have just been able to like go in and smack his list. But it was still good to win it, right? So
You were too you weren't using your destruction brain
yeah,
there.
yeah, I was being too cautious. And so, but still it's good to win a prio. So I gave Andrew the prio.
Yep.
And he continued to play KG, stepped on the objective that I had, and was able to take one of the center ones that I had. So he held 4 when I only held 2, and achieved his tactic. So he held 1, held 2, held more again, and then it went into my turn. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna set up for the double now. Andrew was still playing pretty conservatively, so I did see an opportunity to get into his Kragnos. And so I moved up. He only had a single unit of Wolf screening, so I moved up both Stonehorns and Kragnos in front. And then my middle Stonehorn, I charged into the Wolves and wiped the Wolves. And then I said, okay, I'm going to charge Kragnos. And Andrew said, how? And I looked at it, and it was about a 4-inch gap for Kragnos to fit through. And he's a 5-inch base because there's a piece of terrain in between my Stonehorn and him. So huge mistake. I should have charged my other Stonehorn in on the farther side first, so there would have been enough room, so it wouldn't have been an issue. So huge mistake on my part, but I was still able to get my Stonehorn with Metal Cruncher into Kragnos. And so I come in, do a few mortal wounds on the charge. Both of us fail our roar into each other, and then I roll for Metal Cruncher because I'm like, here's the big six, like big six, take out Kragnos right now, and I roll a 1 again, and I was just like, gosh darn it. And so Kragnos being a pretty high save and also -1 to hit at this point, because Billowing Ash on Andrew's end was up. And so didn't do too much damage to Kragnos, so Kragnos was still feeling pretty healthy at this point. And then we roll off for turn, and it's basically whoever won this priority roll won the game, especially if I won it because I was in such a commanding position. I could get Kragnos into another Stonehorn. I could get the other Stonehorn into Kragnos, another round of Metal Cruncher. So a lot could happen. But then Andrew beat my roll, and so it was Andrew's turn 3. And so he does what I want to do, and he goes in, he charges his Stonehorns in, charges them into my Stonehorns. So hits them pretty hard, does a good chunk of damage. I think they actually both live at that point. But actually, no, my Metal Cruncher Stonehorn goes down to Kragnos, but my Arcane Tome Stonehorn is still up. So that was good at least, but then Andrew scores a full another 5, which hurts me again, because I still only scored 4 in that turn prior. So then it's my go, and so Stonehorn is locked in combat with Kragnos and one of Andrew's Stonehorns, but my Kragnos isn't locked in combat, so then I go and I plan to charge my Kragnos into his Stonehorn, because there's still too much of a not enough of a gap for my Kragnos to go and get his Kragnos, and his Kragnos was only at like 5 or 6 wounds at this point, so I was feeling relatively confident it would go down. So then I charge Kragnos into the Stonehorn, go to roll another big monster charge roll damage, and I roll Snake Eyes again and do 1 mortal wound.
Live and die by those sometimes.
Yep, you do. I would have preferred if that was a 36, but what can you do? And so going to the Stonehorn, only end up doing about 4 damage to it. I actually activated with my Arcane Tome Stonehorn first because he's up against Kragnos and he has a good chance of dying. So going to him, I don't believe I did any damage to Kragnos, or I did very little to Kragnos. So his Kragnos is fine, and then
not going the way you wanted that turn too.
Not going the way I wanted. So my Kragnos goes into his other Stonehorn as well, and his Stonehorn's left on 4 wounds. His Stonehorn then hits back onto my Kragnos, and I rolled abysmally for my saves. And my Kragnos that was at like 14 or 13 wounds at that point went down to 0.
Oof.
And he died. And I fell, and it hurt pretty bad there. And then so that was basically game there. And then Andrew won the following prio roll. So that basically sealed the deal. And he took the game in the mirror. And so it was a tough one. Andrew played very well, playing KG that whole time. He had the objective advantage by going first.
That's what I
think I think if I was still gonna play it, I would give him first again, even knowing what I did, because it just kind of comes down to, can you roll the prio that you need to roll? Because in that third prio, that was the key one, and Andrew was able to win it, especially capitalizing on my mistake of having Kragnos not being able to fit into the other Kragnos, because if that was the case, his Kragnos would definitely be dead. He would just have his 2 Stonehorns left. I'd be in a much better spot. My Stonehorn would be at a lot higher wounds, my Metal Cruncher one, and also not be in danger. So a huge flub up on my part. And then the Dice Gods, unfortunately, not being with me on that one. So Andrew took it, but I was still relatively happy for him because he was 3-1 at that point. So I'm like, okay, so you beat me out of my 4-1.
Yeah.
So now you have to go 4-1, or he's not allowed to play the list anymore. So. Yeah, so that was my round 4, and that was once again another great match against a local player, so that was tons of fun. And then went into my round 5, which was another Night Haunt.
Yep. Exactly what you want.
Exactly what I wanted, but out of all the Night Haunts, this is the Night Haunt that I wanted. This was no Purple Sun and no Cruciator Night Haunt.
Okay.
So no -1 damage and no potentially me losing automatically on a roll of a 1 with a Purple Sun.
But
So Kevin
50
and so
blade dice was not definitely scary.
it's definitely scary, and yeah, so this was against Kevin Wardrop, who's another awesome guy. All my opponents were awesome guys. I got incredibly lucky. Even if my dice rolls weren't with me for some of my games, they were definitely with me for my opponent luck. They were all awesome people. So up against Kevin here. Yeah, interesting list. Instead of having huge blocks of Blade Geist, he decided to go for separate smaller units, which is a good idea in and of itself because of his hero choices where I'm not hyper familiar with Night Haunt, so I may screw up which heroes had what. But I believe it's the Spirit Torment gives all the units +1 to hit in a bubble, and then the Guardian of Souls gives a +1 to wound in a bubble. So it's not like he needed it for auto attack or anything, and so having them in separate units means more charges. More charges means more debuffs. More debuffs means you're more likely to win.
Yeah, especially like the debuffs are huge, specifically the stacking negatives to save against an army like yours.
Yeah, where my saves are all I got in terms of like I don't have the super high wound count, like I don't have like huge horde models that can just take a bunch of damage, right? So saves are key. But once again, luckily with most Night Haunt lists, he was a lot of drops, so I was able to drop him and I gave him first. This one was on Prize of Gallet, so the one where you get to activate the objectives as you go. So I got to choose which objective to activate, so I chose the one on the far right, and then I forget which one I made the proving ground. I think it was the middle or the left. Once again, preemptive, so he couldn't just choose it and then have any one of his multiple GV take that middle one from me later on. So in my turn, did what I usually do. So Kevin kind of moved up, got on all of the objectives on the left, middle, and right. He had 3 Blade Geists up in the sky at this point. Chose not to keep him on the board and also not to bring him down in his turn, which is a good call because there's really no point. So I charge in, blow up the unit Grimgas Reapers on the right, charge into the middle, do a bunch of damage there, and then leave the left open because I only need to hold a few objectives. So not the biggest deal, and that one wasn't even activated yet. And then it went to the prior roll, and it probably would have been pretty spooky for Kevin if he lost it, but he won it. So he was able to hang in there and get a few charges off. And this is when I believe he chose to bring down all 3 of his Blade Geists that were in the sky. And so they were amped up and ready to go. Lined up all in the line in front of my Stonehorns and Craggy, and I was just like, oh no, I've seen how this played out in my first game. I'm not ready for it to happen again. And so I'm just like, okay, fingers crossed he only gets like 1 or 2 in, and then hopefully I'll be okay. Like, I know he gets like a reroll, so
Yeah.
it's a decent chance that like one for sure is going to get in, at least two, and then I'm just hoping that it's not three. And then so Kevin starts rolling down the list. So he goes with the first one, fails, and he's like, you know what? I'll try to re-roll it, fails it, and then he goes for the middle unit, fails it, and then he goes for the unit on the left, fails it. So he failed all of his charges with all of his blade guys that dropped in from the sky. And so I told him I really appreciated that. Yeah,
Very kind of him.
it was super kind
Great
of him.
sportsmanship on his behalf.
Oh yeah, 100%. I told him that. I'm like, you didn't have to fail all your charges, but I appreciate it. It was just a great thing and a nice thing for him to do. And so that was kind of a make or break moment for him. He needed all of those guys to get in to kind of pull back from my first hammer hit. Because once again, then it goes into my turn. And so I start picking off some spirit hosts, start picking off some heroes. And then I win the prio going into 3. So then I'm basically able to hit the rest of his blade geists. So basically his whole army is wiped at this point, except for a few. He had his Dread Scythe Harridan still on the left, and then I think just a scattered unit of blade geists or something like that. So once again, this one was a little bit of a quicker one. So he's just like, "Yep, let's call it. I'll see what tactic I can do," and so he was able to polish off a couple more tactics. And then so it was a pretty high scoring game for me on that one, which was nice. My wins tended to be pretty high scoring throughout this GT, which was great, and even my losses weren't too bad. They were relatively close each way, and so yeah, that was my tournament experience. So 3-2. I was kind of hoping for a 4-1 going into this. Mainly hoping, I know it was a dice roll for Night Haunt, so I was hoping to win that dice roll and not roll that one, but unfortunately got paired into it first round, so that loss kind of sucked. And actually playing against an identical list as yours, like an exact mirror with like no shooting or anything, so it's like melee and who gets charges off first, that's also another like a horrible matchup that I didn't think of. Because yes, if I win the prios and like I win,
it's
like
very
the rolls,
dicey.
Yeah, exactly. Like and Andrew's a solid player.
So
like,
so long as no one's making mistakes, like.
Yeah, exactly. And I made the first mistake of not getting Kragnos in, right?
Yeah.
So
it's funny. I came over when I could tell you guys were packing up. I came over. I'm like, so who rolled better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was like a surprise bad matchup. Like I was thinking about, I'm like, what are the odds I would play Andrew at this tournament? I'm like, like 1 in 64, and like it would depend on wins and losses. Like it's almost not even possible to happen. Then of course it happened. So
funny that it happens day 2 though, especially.
I know it was so random. And Andrew ended up losing his final round game, so he's not allowed to play the list anymore. So
how dare he?
Yeah, I was pretty disappointed in him. He did come up against a Purple Sun Incarnate, which what I mentioned before is a pretty solid counter against my list, and I'm pretty sure his son ate a full health Stonehorn. So
that'll do it.
That hurts, but yeah. So great GT. It was awesome. Like tons and tons of great people there. Amazing time overall. Sorry, I don't have any super big party stories. I just went out to dinner on Saturday
no
with
Ridge.
a couple of the TL guys. Yeah, so I had no Ridge around me, so no bad influences. And I'm personally, if I'm driving, I'm not drinking, and I was commuting, so I wasn't going too hard or anything. So yeah, it was an awesome tournament.
Yeah, so as you said, unfortunately you got some of the bad mashups, but outside of that, how do you like? One of my questions you already answered earlier of like, how did you feel not having much in the way of Galatian veterans or anything? But like, what do you in general? This is their first GT with the new GHB. So how did you feel your list plays with the new book, like comparatively, or the new GHB? Like I know bounty, you don't care if you play into bounty hunters, but we're like expert conquerors. Did you run into that at all where that was notable?
Yeah, expert conquerors was tough and actually impacted a lot of my decisions in cases, mainly against Night Haunt. So just having some Blade Geist and Expert Conquerors, or having some Chain Rasps and Expert Conquerors, it's like having 10 models count as 30, like count as much as a Kragnos, which is 720 points for
Yeah.
like an 100-point unit. It's so that part's tough, but I think it's definitely something that you can play around, and if you know that it's going to happen, you focus down that unit. Because I don't care about the bounty hunter units, right? So I
Yeah.
have that advantage at least. Like my GVR wolves, like a stiff breeze kills them. They're 6 up, 4
Mhm.
wounds. So I can focus on them over bounty hunters because bounty hunters don't affect me. So that's nice in that
Yeah.
case. So that's one of the kind of trade-offs I get. So no more Hunters of the Heartlands, but Expert Conquerors now it only takes 4 GV to outpower a Stonehorn, which is 10 models. And usually a lot more, right? So if I'm not finishing off units, I could not be claiming objectives, where in the previous GHB, it'd be no
You're
question, right?
reliably taking them. Yeah.
Yeah, so that part's tough, but I found that I was able to play around it. My list has such speed and such hitting power that unless like I don't roll too poorly, like it usually is pretty easy to clear. So the new GHB I find is it was almost like a net trade overall.
Yeah.
Not giving up monster points was great, like whenever I lost a monster, but not
No hunters,
getting
as you
those 2
said earlier.
points kind of sucks. Yeah, and no hunters is amazing. Like basically guaranteeing whatever I can go in, like at least a chance to roar or a chance to stomp, and like that came in huge in a lot of ones. Like against Kevin for his Night Haunt roaring, so he can't use Discorporate or anything like that. So um, it was huge. The brutes stomping them right and killing an extra one. So that's one less brute coming in and attacking me, like because they might be in hunters. So, and then also those getting added with the GHB, they increase drops, which is huge for me because
Yes.
I always want to go second because I found if I go second and at least commit in my first turn and then get the double, I win a majority of those games, like probably close to 90+% of those games, just because I wipe whatever screen / important units there, and then I get into whatever else is there. And I have such hitting power and damage that whatever I'm getting into is dying. And I prepare ahead, like make sure I cast Mystic Shield on whatever is going to be going second, so
You're,
that thing will live, and or Finest Hour it, right? So um,
you're
the
super.
the
You can be super resilient as well.
Exactly, exactly. When you invest all your points into 3 models, you got to make sure that each one of those
Yeah.
stays alive and does as much as they can for as long as possible. The biggest disadvantage, actually, with this GHB, with my list, is no easy Grand Strat.
Hmm.
Grand Strats are super tough. I do take what's theirs because that's the best one I got. So, like, I'm usually in their territory, but it tends to be a win more sort of case. In both of the games I lost, I didn't get my grand strat, which maybe should be the intentions of grand strategies. But there is other ones that are auto ones, like we talked about Marks in this
Fire
second round.
Slayers
Like,
one. Yeah.
yeah, like it was basically downhill from him round 2, but from the first turn he guaranteed his grand strat.
Yeah.
So not having to or not having Beastmaster anymore really hurts of just keeping monsters alive because that was relatively easy. Like unless I got tabled, which actually rarely happens in games, I would usually get that tactic or sorry that grand strat. And tactics are kind of tougher now too. Um, I've been practicing trying to get better and making sure that I do the ones that involve my opponent as well because Jordan, I'm not sure if you know this in some of your games, but sometimes when you like are beating your opponent a little too hard, then you can't do eye for an eye, or
Yes.
you
Later
can't
or
do like one of those ones, right? Because it's just like, oh crap, like none of your stuff is alive to be able to interact with and do
yeah.
anything about.
Especially like as a book with no battle tome or white dwarf
Yeah,
tactics.
yeah. So yeah, it's a lot of give and take. Some of the new things that also kind of came with the GHB. So Purple Sun, that's a pretty hard deterrent
Yeah.
for my list. And then Night Haunt also getting their booking coming into prevalence, like 10 out of
Just as
65
a meta
players
shift
here.
that doesn't help you.
Yeah, they're a pretty solid counter. Like I was mentioning to my list, reducing rend, or sorry, getting rid of rend completely, and then reducing damage. So that's a hard shift in the meta for me that wasn't existing in the prior GHB. But I think I'm just gonna try to hope that the Nighthaunt craze maybe dies down a bit. But they're pretty strong
As
right now, so I don't
yeah,
know if I can just hope for that. But
yeah, you often see though, like, people will know for the next event, okay, let's play into something or bring an army that's better against Nighthaunt, and then Nighthaunt don't do it. That's the one thing I think has been great with this edition is the meta
mhm.
has felt very like kind of ongoing and cyclical, never too stale for too long.
Yeah, and like Nighthaunt have like a pretty hard counter also in the meta right now. That's pretty popular with the Skaven book. Like Thankful just being able to blow up a unit of Nighthaunt pretty easily, right?
Yep.
Being able to get him right in there. So that's a pretty nasty one coming in. So it's not just like Nighthaunt dominating the scene or anything, but it's rock paper scissors. It's just unfortunately they're very prevalent right now,
Yep.
and my list doesn't play super well into them. So that's definitely been one of the harder things with this new GHB, but I'm pretty excited to see how the next steps of it go, and definitely get more games in and get more tournaments in, and hopefully get to a few more GTs this season.
Cool. Well, I am going to ask you another question in a second, just in terms of about the tournament. Just want to answer. Assistant ref was just asking me as a TO, not being a player, if I thought any differently about battle tactics and whatnot. Um, I was talking to Jordan, or I had lunch with Jordan and Sean, who were up for the GT. Had lunch with them today. We were talking about a bunch of the stuff like the incarnates and battle tactics and all those different things that are huge shifts in the meta right now. Obviously, nobody likes the disparity of battle tactics and grand strats, like the haves and have-nots. Nobody wants that in the game. Um, I don't believe in like comping things because I feel like the tournament scene is going to be the best when we're all playing the same game. You know what I mean? Like from event to event to event, and you can't really compare events when one event says no purple suns or no incarnates, right? That's a huge shift to the game. And while it's not, I don't think it's the best thing for the game. I don't want to, I want us to all be playing, true, vanilla as it's currently ruled, AOS. Um, so and that's I don't think that's any different. Being a TO as a player for me, just yeah, just same philosophy. Decide don't believe in comp or any of that, so didn't want to do anything too big.
Yeah, I think you did it the right way, Jord. I think going back to VP, especially with the battle plans that we had in there, I think
Mm.
that was 100% the right call. Because the main reason that we shifted from VP, because that's what we used to use for all of our scoring in
Yep.
the AOS 2, was because of Savage Gains.
Yeah.
And
Well, Savage Gains and all the bonus monster points for that.
yes, yeah, exactly. So you had Giants scoring like 50 points in a round where most other armies could like score a max of like 30.
Yep.
So
Yeah. So I think that was a good change actually with the new GHB of them reducing the amount of bonus points because it did just get silly. Like then it was the haves and have-nots of what army had good monsters. You know,
yeah,
Sons of Bama,
exactly.
they ruled for a long time, right? Because of that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, I think going back to VP obviously wins first,
Yep.
but going VP as the tiebreaker, I think that was definitely the right call to balance it out.
Yeah, I'm super happy like in review and hindsight of that. Um, but here, great to hear that that is something you also liked. Now
Hmm.
my question is that always as someone in all aspects who wants to improve and learn. This was I had a lot of help from you guys, like our team, and Josh Akins, our head judge, who has helped me organize everything and brought half the tables and all that. A ton of people that helped in a ton of different capacities. Um, but from a player's perspective, do you think there was anything that could have been improved, or and that's not to say there's a right or wrong necessarily, but any feedback, because there's always room for improvement. So it's
Um,
something I always want to ask.
Yeah, the honestly really solid across the board, George. I'm not just biased because we're part of the same team and obviously good buddies, but no, you hosted an amazing tournament. Everything was amazing, from the painting scores to the hobby and like everything that was involved in there to how basically everything was set up and the rewards given. Maybe the only points, and this might sound funny coming from me, was maybe for sports scoring, have specific criteria for each 1 to 5.
Yep.
That may be my only thing because I think I wouldn't call it a problem, but I think there is definitely a lot of fives given out, and so I know that might have caused like a lot of pain, like counting through. It's just like, oh, 5 5 5 tie, 5 5 5 tie, you know.
Yeah.
So I
Where
think like putting specific criteria and just making sure it's known. It's just like 5 is like an amazing game, like one of the best games you ever played, like an amazing opponent, like awesome
yeah.
person like across the table from me. 4 is like a great game, had tons of fun. 3 was like good game. 2 was like needs improvement, and then 1 was like probably don't want to play this guy again.
Yeah.
So I think maybe having a little bit more specifics there would be better, just to like have a little bit of criteria. But that's kind of mitigated by the fact you do favorite opponent. So favorite opponent helps counteract that. But maybe just my only suggestion
Yeah,
for
no, that's
the future.
a great one. We actually because looking at day one, it was like, again, there were 38 people after day one, tied at match 15
Yeah.
out of 15 um sportsmanship. So we were gonna do like a best opponent vote at the end where you just like choose your one best opponent. We actually, you'll know now that we pivoted and did rank your top 3 best opponents. And we did that because again, we needed bigger tiebreakers. So when we gave 3 points if someone gives you their first, 2 points for second, or 1 point if you were their third best opponent, and that helped break things up a lot. But yeah, I definitely think even for entry that made a lot more work than
Yeah.
I was necessarily was prepared for or realized. Yeah, I think next year, like me and Josh were talking after the event of maybe doing like similar to what we did with after the round 5 game where you ranked your top 3, but just doing that and ranking your top 5. You just rank that's the only input, so that you might not have had any problems in your game 1, but if they weren't like didn't seem overly thrilled to be there, you're probably they're getting less points just by nature of you're rewarding the people who brought a better experience or whatnot.
And that does kind of fill the favorite opponent role
Yeah.
more, right? Than just like a great opponent, like that had a great time. It's like, okay, who are your actual like favorite opponents and who are your best opponents, right? Because you could have like, how do you really differentiate like an awesome game from an awesome game? Like you'll
Yep.
both give them 5/5s, right? Because they're
Yep.
both awesome games. But it's
Exactly.
just like, but which one like did you actually feel was number 1, and which one might have been like a slight number 2, right?
Yep. Nope. Cool. Very, very fair. Well, I appreciate the feedback again. Always looking to improve. Definitely want to do. We're definitely doing Season of War GT again next year. So yeah, look forward
Looking
to
forward
that.
to that
Yeah.
one.
We'll, I'm sure, throw dates in the coming months. Is Yeah, we'll see it. Whatever as events plan out their season next year. But yeah, Zach, unless you have any other closing remarks about the list or tournament or anything.
Nope. Just I'm still happy with the list, even with the 3 and 2. Looking to obviously improve and do better. Always looking to obviously be better when it comes to the competitive play. So I'm still really excited with the list. I still have a lot of confidence in the list. And then also really excited actually for the book that's hopefully coming out in November. So I'll hopefully be
Oh
sticking with
yeah,
ogres for the long haul
nice,
still.
awesome. Well, yeah, keep your fingers crossed that that's the next destruction book.
Yep.
Yeah, cool. With that, I just want to say a big thank you again. Well, first off, Zach for hanging out with us and kind of sharing your weekend path through all your games. But also everyone joining us tonight. Hope you enjoyed these insights into that's list games in the tournament. And yeah, thanks for sticking around with us tonight. So without further ado, we'll say goodnight or good morning wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you soon in another Battle Report.
See you guys.